7. It's a very talented and very, very hard-working group. We've been meeting every single Monday since January. And tonight, we're really pleased to be able to have a planned system for feedback from people who live on the island. And so run some proposals by you and see what you think and get some ideas back so we can begin to collate all this information into something that makes sense for the county council. We'd like to have the rest of the members of our group introduce themselves.
Shall I call the roll?
Oh, well, that will do it.
Well, I do that.
Okay.
My name is Kathy Berg. I live in Birch Bay, and I'm here. Jim.
Jim Dickinson, Lummi Island.
Patricia.
Here. Oh,
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm currently, my day job is finance director at WTA. I have about 15 to 18 years in executive management, finance, and transportation, including military, aerospace defense, and railroading, and about 30 years total in accounting.
Diane.
Hi.
Diane's sick, so she's not going to talk long.
Hi, I'm Diane Harper, and please stay away from me tonight. I moved to the island in '83 and was very happy to return full-time in 2007. And I'm afraid I might still be contagious, so if you want to talk to me, wait till next week.
Chandler.
Chandler Johnson. I'm the guy that's going to be contagious tomorrow.
I'm using my elbow, come on.
You're a brave man.
I'm here.
Do Diane and Chandler want to explain a little bit about their background?
I worked for Whatcom County for 9 years in the land use planning department, so I'm pretty familiar with how hard county employees work and the job that they try to do as best they can. I also worked for Metro Transit in King County for 13 years, so I'm familiar with some of the issues associated with transportation.
My present background is I'm finishing PhDs while looking for a professorship. So if any of you know of a university that's looking for a professor in sociology and applied math, let me know. I have about 12 years of experience in operations research, working principally with manufacturers on applied math problems. So optimizing large-scale shop floor problems, implementing ERP and MRP systems. And what else? I was born here in '74 and left in the '90s to go to college and then moved back to finish my PhD in 2009. I'm still finishing. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. Barbara, did you want to say anything more about your show?
I'm all right.
But he's not next.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry.
I didn't say anything about me.
Riley doesn't hold back. I worked as a city council person for 12 years, retired at the end of '09, and before that time had a career in nonprofit public relations. And Riley started.
I'm here. I just seen it, but I don't know anybody. I think I recognize everybody here, so you know who I am now. We'll see.
Great. Okay, thank you. We sent out an agenda, but because Diane is under the weather, we've changed the agenda around quite a bit. Hopefully still do the same job of getting good input, feedback from you. But oh, I'm sorry. So we have minutes from last week. Does anybody like to move approval? Second?
I see.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now go for
Okay.
it.
Sure you don't want the treasurer? We don't have
Zero,
treasurer.
zero, zero.
Okay, tonight what I want to do is, the first thing on our agenda is to have a recap of the presentation that Patricia Dunn made to the group a few weeks ago at the county council meeting room. There were not terribly many of the islanders there at that meeting for obvious reasons, and it was an incredibly important piece of our whole work, so I would like to have that happen first. Secondly, I have some specific questions of proposals that have come up, ideas that have been run past, and I would like to just run through those questions very quickly, get as much feedback as we can in a short period of time, kind of be a hard boss to get things moving through those questions. And then the third part is a very interesting interactive exercise with Chandler, who has developed a way so that we can look at exactly how much money the county has budgeted for operations, and for 2011 he's plugged in all the fares and how each fare has to change depending on the changes of other fares. He's looking at me as though that's not an adequate explanation.
Diane has a similar tool. So
Okay.
Diane will be you're up for it. Yeah.
Okay,
Doing
good.
something as well right before that. So.
All right, excellent. And then we'll have let people know what the next step is after that. So with that, if Patricia would move through a truncated version of her budget and accounting presentation.
I'm used to working on the laptop. Okay. This is an abbreviated version of the presentation I did about a month ago. It took about an hour, and I'm going to try and do this in about 10 minutes. And if you have questions about this, I'd be happy to answer them after the meeting or during the breakout session. So there are a number of accounting issues that have come up over time, and so I looked at this in a logical, rational way, tons and tons of research, and ended up with a number of about 5 or 6 papers that I wrote. These are on the Ferry Forum website if you're interested in looking at these, with quite a bit of footnoting and reference to other details on this. These are the items that I looked at: cost allocations, expense versus capital, the motor vehicle fuel tax accounting, revenue accounting, interest income, cash reserves, and conclusions. Brian, can I get you to drive for me?
Oh, sure.
Just put it down here a little bit. That might be better. One question that came up was the cost allocations. And people said, my gosh, we're starting to get all these costs that we didn't have before. Absolutely true. I did go through, did an analysis of the costs since the inception of the enterprise fund, 2006, and looked at the individual times that were accumulated or charged to the Ferry fund and the patterns that we had there. And also looked at accounting authorities and promulgations. Promulgations in accounting is an authoritative body. There are no laws that dictate what you do in accounting, but we do have promulgating authorities. We also have accounting reference, so it might be something, for example, that the state of Washington does. We don't have to follow it, but if they're doing it, it's a pretty good clue that we probably should be doing it. So Public Works began to fully allocate costs to the ferry in 2007. Then the county began to fully allocate costs to Public Works in 2008. And you know what they say about things going downhill, and this is one of them. What they were doing is absolutely, totally, technically correct. They should be doing it. The GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, has papers on this. It's good practice. The county and Public Works, however, did not do what they should have been doing earlier than this era. And what happened in 2008, government revenue started going downhill, and every government entity everywhere has started to look everywhere they can for ways to charge up the cost and do cost recovery. So in 2011, there were even a few more additional costs that the county allocated. And while we might think it's not fair, it is absolutely correct that they can do it. There are no rules out there saying they can't. In fact, all of the promulgating authorities, all of the guidance says they should be allocating these costs. And if you're interested in it, I have quite a bit of detail on that. So what they're doing now is consistent with best practices, and it's reasonable and consistent within Public Works. There are a couple of things that I found that, like, it doesn't quite meet the reasonableness test. Those are noted. The dollar amounts, however, on those are not large. And again, this is out on the website. So this is this shows the administrative costs by the type of cost. So the gold are the Public Works employees, and you have this almost a U-shaped trend on that. There was a Ferry Fund administrator up here that went down, and then you can tell, oh, they decided to start allocating more costs right through there. The red are the Ferry employees. And, oh yes, when we had an administrator for Public Works, that was there. Then we have the Public Works indirect costs and the county indirect costs. Public Works indirect cost would be things like a safety technician, safety administrator, or safety expenses, I'm sorry. The county indirect costs are from the county treasurer, possibly the executive office, IT, HR, accounting. Those kind of things. Here are some, what we would call some opportunities for these. The director and accounting supervisor costs are high. The accounting supervisor was at, I believe, 25% of her time, and the director at, excuse me, 20% of their time. The reason for these is because the supervisor, accounting supervisor, is the person doing the analysis for fare box recovery and for the negotiations. So she's spending quite a bit of her time over the last year and projected to do that, through the next year on that. The director the same way. Right now, just in some conversations, probably 70–80% of his time is being spent on ferry issues. Again, like it or not, you think it's fair or unfair, that's where the numbers are coming from. The safety tech is high. Looking at B&F standards, the standards indicate the ferry should have about 0.1 of a safety FTE, not the 0.25 allocated. Opportunities, shared services, or outsourcing. However, one thing to consider is that this position also investigates accidents. There were 17 accidents on the ferry, the fender benders, whatever. My personal opinion is you could reduce this to next to nothing by putting in a surveillance system that would cost about under $10,000, and your investigation time would get cut to about 0, and definitely could, in my humble opinion, go to 1/10 of a safety FTE. Clerical costs could be mitigated by expanded use of technology and alternate business practices. Some examples of these are to outsource ticket sales, sell tickets on the web, and maybe you can have web FAQs that would reduce phone inquiries, and look at possibly doing a mobile phone app also to do things, because right now it's really hard to look at the ferry schedule on your phone. There's some other things that you could do. One thing I talked about last month is that the county has a pretty old, antiquated accounting system. It's just hard and time-consuming to get data out of it and do analysis. The brand that they have, J.D. Edwards, is really great, but they have an older version. They don't stay very current on it. So that doesn't help the situation, and that's really a county issue. Okay. want to talk about repair and maintenance because there's been this controversy that I've heard continually about, is it capital, is it expense? And the question is, why do we care? If it's capital, the county pays 100% of it. If it's expense, fair recovery picks up 55% and the county picks up 45%. Well, that whole system kind of creates this us versus them mentality as far as should it be capital or should it be expense. And there quite often are fine lines when it comes to this. This is, you get a bunch of accountants together at a cocktail party and they can discuss this all night long. They were really into it. And I'd be leaving the room, let me tell you. So that's why it's relevant. And we've had high repair and maintenance costs, and it's invited the question, God, these are so high, it should really be capitalized, right? However, going through this, and I believe it's about an 11-page paper with footnotes from the IRS, from the state of Washington, what's called the BARS manual, the Budget and Accounting Reporting Manual, which is the Bible for any government entity within the state of Washington. A number of other pretty solid accounting sources. These indicate that the Ferry Fund accounting practices do comply with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, the promulgating authorities and other accounting guidance. And much as I would love to, I'm not going to get into that right now because this is probably about 15 minutes by itself. But if you're interested, I would love to talk to you about it. Next one. And this shows you what the repair and maintenance is by the asset. What jumps out? It's the red. It's the vessel and dry dock. That's where the vast majority goes. And there's a boat out there that is almost as old as I am. And I remember when I was, I think, second or third grade and taking the ferry when it was brand new and how everybody on the island was so excited about it. But you have something old, and just like me, it takes more maintenance, you know? It just keeps going. The green is the, I think it's the dock, and that required some pretty heavy-duty maintenance in 2009 with the ships. And I thought, oh, for sure, this one should have been capitalized. But I went through the promulgating authorities, and it just absolutely fit into its repair and maintenance because of the way it was done. Next one. Now I'll talk a little bit about motor vehicle fuel tax accounting. The Public Works receives motor vehicle fuel tax revenues from two sources. Talk about the easy one first, the deficit funding. There's state legislation that this $500,000 fund, which was a lot of money back in the 90s, would be allocated to county ferries to help make up for their deficit. Well, right now, divided 3 ways, and we're a small part of that percentage, it really doesn't add up to that much, but hey, we'll take whatever we can get, right? And there's a formula based on what your deficit is, what that amount is going to be. The one that's a little more controversial is the revenue attributable to the ferry system. And the formula for this is based on bridges. The docks are considered a bridge for the purposes of MVFT funding. And and there's a specific dollar amount that can be traced to that, and that amount, along with the rest of the MVFT, gets deposited in Public Works. It is considered by Public Works in the county to be part of that 45% that they pay. And this impacts the fare calculation. An example of that is in the paper that I wrote. And again, because of time, I'm not going to get into that tonight here. So it really isn't in the rider's best interest, or our financial interest really, to have that done the way it is. And there's been some argument about the intent of the ordinance that was written by the county and where that should go. But looking at this, there was no clear guidance. It's not clear in the ordinance. And I think it's one of the things that we want to look at as we go forward. This tells you what how the current accounting records that. And, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm getting into revenue. But one more note on the MVFT, and I just lost that one. I'll get back to it. Okay, current accounting records revenue at net. Gross minus discounts equals revenue. So this is what goes on the books. Let's say that I buy a ticket, and because we don't have this age-based, but let's say because I'm 12 years old, I get a discount, I only pay $2. This is what we get recorded. From an accounting perspective, you really want to know what's your gross, what's your discount, what's your revenue. So you know how much are we giving away, if you will. You need to have that kind of information to make good decisions. So one of the suggestions that we'll be making is to enhance transparency in financial reporting, record it gross, record the discounts. This is compliance with best accounting practices. Oh, and that's what I was getting at on the motor vehicle fuel tax. By recording it separately, you really are enhancing transparency and showing what the source of the revenues are. Okay, a little slow on the uptake on that one. Okay, well, other accounting practices that I looked at. One is to establish a cash reserve policy, and this is in accordance with a new best practice that came out with the Government Finance Officers Association. It's brand new. This should be incorporated into the budget and rate setting process. This has come up, it's not, with an enterprise fund, you can't go in and rate it like you can other kinds of government funds. However, this just came up because of the economic problems in every government agencies. There's been a lot of rating going on. And so this practice came out. It's always good to have cash on hand to weather the tough times anyway. Cash is king. And this is sort of a summary of some of the other things I've said. It's impossible for even a knowledgeable reader of financial statements to understand the Ferry financials as they're currently published. I've had 30 years of accounting, and with any luck at all, I should be able to find my way around a balance sheet and an income statement. But it was hard to do on some of this. The reporting should be modified to reflect the type of expenditure instead of where it came from. There's $600,000 that's charged out from the ERR fund. Well, what the heck is the ERR fund? Well, it's the Internal Service Fund, and one of the R's, it's Internal Revenue and Revolving Fund. I don't know what's revolving about it, but I mean that's not clear. And it turns out that $600,000 is for some dry dock expenses. It's for fuel. I mean, all of it makes sense when you start looking at it. Some labor and parts, that type of thing. But it's not clearly reported. We need to have more transparency there. And that's what I'm getting into here. If they would just, maybe once a quarter, allocate that amount out. It's about 3 or 4 line items, simple little journal entry. You really enhance the transparencies. And also look at exploring the transfer of the ferry assets to the ferry fund. It's a ferry fund, wouldn't you think would have a ferry in it? Maybe a couple docks? One would hope. However, it doesn't. They're over in the ERR fund. And I've really had, as an accountant, struggled with this one. I can't figure out why they didn't transfer the assets. It's as though it's not really being treated as an enterprise fund. To analyze any entity, you need to know the assets, the liabilities, the goodies, the baddies, and the innies and the outies, the revenue and the expenses. And you can't do that with the way the financials are set up on this. Conclusions. In general, the accounting is in accordance with GAAP. They're doing the right things. However, reporting transparency should be enhanced. And again, is the ferry fund really an enterprise fund? If it is, let's treat it like that. And also move the assets over to where they should logically belong. And also explore alternate fare box recovery formulas. Again, to get away from this, is it capital, is it expense? And really, who cares? What's best for the ferry system? What if we invest $50,000 here, but we save $20,000 a year over here? You know, we should be looking at the big picture, not the individual impacts on who pays for it. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
I would like to try an experiment. I know you probably have questions about this and concerns. And what I would like to suggest is that we set aside 5 minutes right now and have as many of those questions and concerns in as concise a manner as possible so that we can record them both. Shane Roth, right?
Yep.
Is here to do some video recording so that we can check our tape later. And
That's
is
correct.
Rayma here also? Oh, there she is. Thanks. She has agreed also to keep notes so that we have a record of the kinds of feedback and questions that you have. From Patricia's presentation, can you tell me if there are questions or concerns? And we may not have time to answer them tonight, but we really want to know what the questions or the concerns are. Does that make sense? How could there be no questions? Hi.
You were saying that certain things should be in a different category. Who can make that happen?
The accountant.
The accountant has the power, doesn't do that.
Well, it's just a journal entry. I mean, I don't think it's not, it's probably not a big enough deal to have a policy or procedure on it. I could be wrong, but mechanically it's very simple. We do it in a few minutes.
And that would be one of our recommendations as a task force to the county accounting firm. Are there other? Yes.
The last recommendation about alternate fare box things, models, or
Right.
could you say what some of those might be, or I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay. Well, right now the recovery formula is that fares will pay 55% of its operating expenses, and there's just not a lot of philosophic logic behind that. It's like, well, at one point that was roughly what the operating expenses would be. So what we want to start looking at is, what are the direct expenses? What are the indirect expenses? What are variable costs? What are fixed costs? You know, can we come up with a method that, you know, where we say, okay, the users will pay this from a philosophical viewpoint, and then we morph that into a formula. So, I mean, it's a great question, and we're just starting to tackle that part of it.
Will one of your recommendations be a budget, a yearly budget?
They have a budget.
They do?
Oh, yeah, they have a budget.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You can find it by going to the county website and looking at the Public Works Department, and then the ferry is inside the Public Works Department budget. Quite a ways down.
And they have 2011 and 2012. There's not too much difference between them, a little bit of an inflationary factor for 2012. Anybody else? Mike?
Pat, in your professional judgment as a CFO, is it fair to say you found no large caliber smoking guns?
I did not. You know, I found the kind of things you're going to find in any entity. The one item that I felt should have been capitalized was the toilet install, and I am very prejudiced on that, having grown up in Alaska and used a lot of outhouses in the pool. That is definitely an improvement that should not have been R&M. It was about $18,000, and it was about 5 years ago.
Oh,
But no, there were no smoking guns. You know, if you were to come over to WTA today, you would probably find, quite frankly, the same kind of things. You know, it's like any entity could be better, but they're definitely not bad. They're fine that way as far as following the rules. Yes.
Where does the lease with the Lummis fall in all this?
That falls into the Gooseberry dock expense.
So that
Or maybe it's staging. It's one of those cost centers.
Operations.
that seems to me so complex, because suddenly it's including all of their traffic lights and new roads.
No, I'm talking about the 200,000 that we have been paying, and that's in the budget. That part, I don't know. Yes?
And what about the red and the security, where does that go?
That's also in the.
For the parking lot, the red.
And that's on the Gooseberry Point side, and I think we're gonna talk about that a little bit more.
Yep.
And, so I won't steal your thunder.
But does that go into the capital? Or
No, that's expense.
operating expense?
Right, right. That's expense. Your question?
Please clarify this.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I want to say one thing as one of the board members. This is as it is now. This may not be what we end up with. So don't despair and think, oh my goodness, look at that ever-increasing curve that the county's got plotted for us.
Yeah. It's true, thanks, Jim, that's a good point.
Well, I wanted to say one thing. Having attended all these meetings, Pat said everything, she summarized it, but one little kernel that got maybe missed is what Chris said about the fare box recovery rate.
It's Megan.
Oh, Megan.
Thank you.
The philosophical problem of that is that it puts the county and the Lummi Islanders at opposite poles when you're thinking about funding, because they don't want to capitalize anything, and we want to capitalize everything. So it's just an enmity that doesn't really have to exist.
And that's what we hope to do in looking at fare box recovery, is look at the whole system, so that we're making decisions. Maybe we do a capital improvement that will save operating costs down the road.
So looking at other kind of local ferries, like the Guaymas ferry, do they use the fare box recovery system, the same kind of ratios? Does anybody know?
Diane knows more about that.
You investigated Pierce too. I'm going to ask Chandler.
I'll answer actually with respect to Pierce, because I looked at that most recently.
I couldn't hear it. To where?
I'll answer with respect to Pierce County,
Pierce.
because that information is closer in RAM than the stuff about Skagit. Diane, interrupt if this sounds incorrect. Pierce County's ordinance specifies that they should recover 80%. The fare box should recover 80% of operating costs, capital, and depreciation. 80% of all three. In fact, their Pierce County's 14-year plan has them recovering about, well, where is it? It's like 50% of operating costs only 4, 5, 6, 14 years from now. So the ordinance and what they're actually budgeting are completely disconnected. But, so yes, it's built in there, the fare box recovery, but it's not clear what the target really is.
I guess that's what you're saying.
Skagit County, just a few years ago, adopted the 55% operating, mimicking Whatcom County, but I don't know that they're achieving that.
One thing from what my looking into this is that every system is different, and when you look at Washington State ferries, it's wildly different. And we are attempting to have an inter-county meeting with the other counties to try to, so we get some idea of what we're looking at. Because when you, as Patricia said, when you got into the Whatcom County system, things weren't exactly self-explanatory in neither of those. So we're trying to actually get a meeting together.
We actually have a lot of data put together too about comparisons of those three ferry systems, like Guaymas, Pierce County, which is just one ferry from Dash Point to Vashon, and ours, which are very comparable in length.
It's
Anderson
Island.
Still at Anderson Island.
Anderson Island.
So are those on the ferry forum? The comparisons?
The comparisons, did we ever get those on the ferry forum?
I think.
Well, Jim had some that I got.
I think they're on both.
Okay.
One thing becomes patently obvious with the three systems, per minute, per mile. This one is by far the most expensive.
Yes, sir.
Parking. Is it true that Lummi Island is the only ferry system that has free parking? And the other thing is the rent of the parking areas, is that a large impact?
I'm going to talk about the parking in a minute, but I don't know the answer to the other question about other free parking.
The other ferries do have free parking.
Okay.
I'd like to ask that when somebody talked earlier about the philosophy of how a system should work for the people, and the idea of going to other counties and seeing how they do things. And so when Pat talks about how the finances for the administration and upkeep of the ferry are what you would expect to see, I would just like to ask that needs-based fares be considered in that overall philosophy, and the sort of the sliding scale be adjusted to fit what you would expect to see in the rest of the counties. So I hope that gets considered.
We've worked on needs, and I believe Diane's going to be talking about it later, and I'll back her up if I can.
Okay, one more. Yes.
Maybe when you talk about it, I have this vague memory of it saying that basically 50 cents of every fare paid, be it a pedestrian fare or a car driver, is going toward the $90,000 per year for parking. I don't know if I got that right, so if you could revisit that.
Last year we had 180,000 round trips purchased on the ferry. And last year the cost of the parking, the lease, and the security was $90,000. So a straight shot is 50 cents. However, we only pay 55% of that. So it actually works out to be 28 cents a trip that we're paying for the lease, for the parking, and the security.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Patricia. That was really helpful. I hope you'll excuse the sort of scattershot approach tonight. We want to get as much feedback as we can in the 2.5 hours that we have available to us. So I'm just going to go through a list of some of the ideas that have come up that appear to have potential for reducing our OR operating costs particularly, and to get feedback as fast as I can about each of the items. And we have a timer, if Kathy will agree, so that I know when we've spent 5 minutes on each question. The first one was concerning that parking question. If we spend $90,000 a year on the lease plus the security person, plus the people who park there would probably be taking the ferry if they didn't park there, coming back and forth, adding to the revenue. Chandler has done some calculations and some eyeballing of the parking lot. Looks like it's 2/3 full on both sides much of the time. Which means that the revenue that we lose on the ferry is about $70,000. So if you add 90 and 70, we're at 160 a year. That is not part of the costs, basically. The question is, for all of you, how important is being able to park on at Gooseberry Point to you?
It's very important. Now with the $3 surcharge for anything you ride, it basically doesn't save you any money to park and walk across. It was a 280% increase for Whatcom now.
Mm-hmm.
So I still use it. I still have a car parked over there now full time. It used to not be over there full time. It's now over there full time, just to be able to afford to go back and forth. But it's not saving me that much money. And it's certainly if you start paying for the ferry or paying for the parking lot, then it would just be a wash. Then I wouldn't park there anymore.
So
and then you're talking about longer lines and waiting and more inconvenient. It's now an inconvenient because tomorrow I'll have to put my rubber boots on and walk across. So it's not a luxury, it's just a matter of having to maintain standard of living is that I can do that. So to me, it's very important, and then
It is very important.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing.
And a hardship too, keep that in mind.
Okay. The other thing I failed to mention is that the lease for that property is up next year, and we begin negotiating again for a new lease. It's very cheap now, $30,000 a year.
Can I just comment that we've had discussions that there could be cheaper ways of providing security. On the other hand, next year the lease gets renegotiated, and I would not be willing to bet against it going up. And so we decided just to present the question as it is. Although we know there are cheaper ways to provide security, we don't know what the rental fee will be next year.
Yes.
Just to be realistic, at one point, the Lummis did offer to include a rental fee for that lot in the existing negotiations, and that fee was $110,000 a year, as I recall, and they were going to work some deal where if there's road improvements, they could take it down to zero. But it's not going to come cheaply, and we all have to be realistic about that. One of the differences from other ferry places, they probably don't pay those kind of rental fees to get the parking, and we really have to be realistic about that. I know that the people that park there want to keep parking there, but it's a big expense.
Yes,
Question is it important? It's not to me. I own one car. I can't afford a second car. I'm at an age now where I can't haul up and down the ramp all the stuff that we buy in town that are necessities. And so I rely on being able to transport whatever I buy in town into my garage so that I can get it into the house.
Okay, good point.
Well, for 15 years when I worked full-time in town, I always parked on the other side. I know things have changed now, but I think many things are temporary. I personally felt it was convenient for me because I knew I could get to work on time. And I had the kind of job I had to, which is very important for lots of people, particularly with caregiving jobs. And secondly, I actually felt like I was sort of giving a space in line to somebody else, and that I was helping to save the ferry from making extra runs, which at this point you don't want to figure into the cost because we always have the labor sitting there, but fuel is not going down. Fuel is going up, the wear and tear on the ferry that happens when you make extra runs, and the lines, there are a lot of people walking on, and as fares go up, there will be more. So I think you have to look, aside from sort of the idea of meeting the needs of an entire community, which I don't know how many people on this island commute to work, it'd be interesting to know, but the young families, that's how they do it. Yeah. And that's how they get their kids to football and soccer. And you would be undercutting a whole part of the community that, I mean, all over this country, we're supporting park and ride, the federal government. Look at that parking place in Ferry, the park and ride. I mean, there's little mini pavilions everywhere. So I personally think there's probably money for park and ride. I think there are other options like parking at the casino, and the Lummis could make money running a shuttle, which would reduce traffic on Haxton. I mean, but I think it's a really essential part of this community.
You know, it wasn't that long ago that we waited 3 ferries to get off this island, a lot, and we're in, you know, recession period that is stopping a lot of the families who are going home here from coming, and hopefully that will be temporary for now. So I don't use that parking lot either, but I think it would be extremely short-sighted decision based on what's occurred in the last couple of years versus what could happen.
Carl, did you?
Just because kind of purely selfish standpoint, I represent a lot of people who are retired. We just don't use that lot period except during dry dock.
Okay. Yes, Barbara, we've got down to less than a minute. Maybe you could have people raise their hands, important, not important, and we could count it that way.
We have yet to have a non-nuanced answer.
I appreciate that, but
yeah.
in the interest of time.
Okay.
I can be sure.
Sure.
I'd like to second everything you said. I have a family and I have a full-time job. It's a matter of getting on the ferry at a certain time.
Okay.
It's important. It's very important.
Getting to work on time or wherever.
Yeah.
I have a lot of health problems, but I take the bus because I'm low income, and the bus just doesn't come enough to serve. But I hardly ever keep a car on the other side.
Okay. Good.
I've used it for 10, 15 years, walk on full time.
Is it because you want to be able to be sure that you're over there at a certain time?
And the economy.
Okay.
Just
Save some money. All right. Let me just ask then quickly, if I can make this, frame this in a yes or no answer. For how many people is having the Gooseberry parking lot critically important?
Critically isn't.
Critically important.
It's not
Okay, so, okay, then
Excuse me. I'm really listening to what you're saying, and I don't think that it's fair. I think what has to happen is a consensus on the island of how many people have families, the reasons. I don't think that this group is representative
Well, that's true
to
too.
give you a clean picture.
And one of the things we want to do is try to develop a proposal so that we can get specific reactions from much more broader slice of the island. I think you're absolutely right.
You also could put the questions on the Ferry forum and invite people to answer them and send you answers. It doesn't have to end here.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to say something really quick. I was at the post office today. I ran into a lady I know who's probably about 25 years old. I said, "Why don't you come to these meetings?" "Well, I'm busy. I've got children. I don't even, I said, "But if they raise the ferry fares again, I don't know what we're going to do." Now, here's the thing. If you want things to us, you've got to come to us. There's 7 of us. We don't have time to come out and find every one of you.
Well,
So fire up your friends and have them tell us.
and we were talking earlier too, if there are messages that you would like to get to the whole group, all you need to do is to write to Kathy Berg at Comcast.net, and she will distribute, it's KATHYBERG at Comcast.net, and she will distribute all the messages to all of us.
May I just add one brief thing? I think we need to know what the implications are, because
I know.
more people walking across, less vehicle.
Right.
I mean, we really need to look at this as a big picture, because you could be saying we need this, but then what's going to happen?
Right. And that's what this group is going to have to do when it
Well, you guys
makes
must
a
thank you.
recommendation.
Maybe this is the next question, but that's kind of a cut and dried question you're asking us there. Is once you kind of move on, are you going to start talking to us about possible paid parking and things, options like that as well? So you're bringing that up?
That's another.
That's something I would comment on, but that's not the question right now.
No,
Barbara?
you're right. And we have
Barbara? One of the dilemmas, the reason we started approaching parking was we started looking at what could you charge for parking. One of the things that became oddly, well at least unexpectedly to me, clear very quickly was that you would have to charge more for somebody to park at Gooseberry than it would cost for them to drive, than the delta for them to drive across rather than walk. Given the $90,000 it costs, you'd have to pay more than $4.80.
I'd like to make one point. Everybody's looking at this as a microcosm of what it is now. We may end up totally different when we're done. We may end up with a different ferry. We may end up with a different place to park over there. We are investigating that. So this is all tentative.
Yeah.
And you have to be taking that. If you want something to change, let us know.
Yeah. There were several questions that are implicit in your question too, which is if we had a security camera, we could save 60,000 of the. What was saved at least after the expense, the camera system, 60,000 of that cost. So there are all kinds of ways of doing it. I guess what I'm trying to do is get a measure of how critically important the ability, I guess, what we're really talking about, of walking on the ferry and getting wherever you're going when you need to be there. Isn't that the question?
The question is twofold. One is needing to be there, and the other is needing to save some money. Because you're doing and a lot of people are doing it more for saving the money. Other people are doing it to be there.
Well, there's one more thing, and that is carrying heavy burdens.
Yeah.
Because I have something wrong with my neck, and the older you get, the bigger deal that gets.
Yep.
And so some people saw that with a baggage cart that's in a waiting room, and it goes on the ferry and unloads like our dry dock did. but that is a big consideration with the car.
Okay.
You know, I think that the distinction between the two needs to save money and to be in appointments on time, that's kind of key. I remember Bud Jewell a long time ago said that driving on with our empty boat, that's where we're making money. If we can fill up the boat, we're gonna cover our costs, we're gonna reduce fares, it's gonna really make us money to have a full boat every time it goes across. And he said, it should cost you $1 more to take your car than it does to walk on. And I thought, that really struck me, which would, for now at least, fill up the boat and make us all kinds of money. When the good times roll again, we'll have lines down to Lego Bay, but,
that's a really good point.
yeah, and if the people that, I mean, we can't ignore the people that have to get to work at a certain time, so, but that's gonna reduce the need for parking if we could couple it with a very short distance between walking on and driving the car.
You mean in fare?
In fare.
Short,
yeah.
Short gap.
Because we're gonna make money by making them really close together. It's now.
One more, and then we're gonna move on to the next question.
And just to follow up on what Colleen said, Fred Kenny's demonstrations in the Plick things really pointed that out. As walk-ons and drive-ons parted, ferry fares started, or income started diving. And we know it's a seesaw effect that, okay, then we got longer lines and people are upset. However, Jim talking about the new boat, that's like buying a parking lot. If we can start loading cars, like they said, every hour, it's like buying a parking lot. And we really got to think about that because the parking is so expensive over there. If we can somehow get away from it and still keep cars moving.
Good point. Good point.
Just really fast, driving a car across, like for me personally, is the only reason I cannot carry 100 pounds of chicken feed, and I have to have my cars.
Okay.
Get in, get out, because that's why I go into town, is to buy supplies.
Right. Well, let me go on to the next, there are two questions that are related. When Patricia went through the analysis of all the costs of the ferry, the crew costs were by far the highest.